2 years into our marriage, I still considered Susan and me newlyweds. It had been 2 years since we exchanged vows, promising to spend forever together. Little did I know that our idyllic world was about to be shaken to its core. My name is Ryan Kitchener, and I turned 30 this year. I married Susan 2 years ago after we made it work. We worked in different departments, but for the same company. Every time our paths crossed in the office hallways or in the elevator, I couldn't help but think what a beautiful woman she was. One fortunate day, a coworker introduced us, and my heart did a little victory dance. I seized every opportunity to talk to Susan and eagerly watched every movie and read every book she recommended. Back then, it seemed like Susan had a boyfriend, but I didn't press her for details. I wanted her to know that her happiness mattered more to me than her relationship status. My efforts to close the gap between us gradually paid off, and Susan eventually quit her job. She became a stay-at-home wife, focusing on cooking and flower arrangement classes, leisurely lunches with her friends, and enjoying a comfortable and relaxed life. 2 years into our marriage, when our parents started hinting about wanting grandchildren, an unbelievable incident unfolded. The busy season of overtime at work had finally ended, and I was in high spirits as I left work on time. I wanted to surprise Susan, thinking she might have been feeling lonely due to my demanding schedule. So I bought her favorite cake on my way home, picked up brochures of nearby tourist spots for a mini vacation I was planning, and even ordered takeout so Susan wouldn't have to worry about dinner. As I entered our home and announced my early return, Susan's reaction surprised me. She seemed taken aback as I handed her the cake she loved. Something was off. "Susan, there's something wrong," I said as I handed her my suit jacket. Susan gave a small nod, her face solemn. We sat down in the living room, and then she dropped a bombshell. "I'm pregnant, and I want us to break up." Those words hit me like a sledgehammer. I couldn't fathom hearing such a thing from Susan. We hadn't even started trying for children yet. It was Susan who had convinced me to wait, to enjoy our newlywed life a little longer. We'd been careful for these past 2 years, so how could she now be pregnant? "I want a divorce. It's for the child," Susan continued, her words piercing my heart. Those words for the child were not supposed to be spoken in such a context. I had always imagined that we would say them joyfully together as a couple. But now, Susan looked at me with determination in her eyes. "Please sign this. I want a divorce for the sake of my child." She laid out divorce papers with her signature already on them, and her parents had already signed as witnesses. Susan had consulted her parents without my knowledge. And now, faced with the unexpected, I couldn't afford to lose my composure. Finding out who the father was would be a journey filled with unexpected twists and turns. "I have my pride too," I retorted, my voice tinged with disbelief. Susan gave a firm nod in response, and at that moment, I felt a storm of emotions raging within me as I held the pen to sign those dreaded divorce papers. I had to focus all my strength on keeping my hands steady. The weight of the situation was almost unbearable. Susan, with a large suitcase in hand, began making her way towards the door. I had no words for her, no way to convey the turmoil in my heart as she was about to leave. Susan didn't glance back at me. It was clear from her expression that her feelings for me had vanished. She disappeared into the twilight, pulling her suitcase behind her, leaving me with nothing but the fading echo of her footsteps. All I could do was stand there and watch her retreating figure. That night, I sought solace in alcohol, drinking alone until I eventually passed out. I woke up in the living room, nursing a hangover and shivering with a fever. It was different from the usual hangover symptoms. I knew I had to call in sick. To work, as I lay there, I couldn't help but wonder if the events of the previous night had been some surreal dream. But the empty liquor bottles and the pan on the living room table were tangible reminders that it was all painfully real. Susan had indeed betrayed me and left, and when reality crashed down upon me once more, my chest ached with anguish. They say the cuter they are, the harder they fall, and it couldn't have been truer in my case. I couldn't believe how much I now despised Susan, the woman I had once loved so deeply. My only thought was to find the man who had torn our lives apart. The days passed, and I spent hours rummaging through Susan's abandoned belongings, hoping to find some clue about the other man. Among her possessions, I discovered the ring and bracelet I had given her when we were dating. They lay in a jewelry case, a stark contrast to the discarded wedding ring I found in the trash can. The sight of that ring, once a symbol of our love, now abandoned, made me dizzy with despair. I kept searching, hoping to unearth any trace of the other man. I couldn't stop, as if my very existence depended on it. Yet my relentless pursuit only succeeded in exacerbating my already fragile health. I ended up taking a week off from work, unable to cope with the overwhelming emotions that engulfed me. When I finally mustered the strength to return to work, my coworkers were already aware of my divorce, despite my not having shared the news with them. Tom Geary, my direct boss, approached me with a smirk, reveling in my misfortune. "Ryan, how are you feeling? You're such a softie, falling ill just because of a divorce." He taunted. Geary was known for his nitpicking and his tendency to make my life difficult. His condescending demeanor and sleazy behavior had always rubbed me the wrong way. As I endured his presence with gritted teeth, I suddenly realized what he had mentioned: the divorce. Before Susan and I got married, she and Geary had worked in the same department. A dreadful suspicion crept over me, and I couldn't contain my anger any longer. "Are you the father of Susan's unborn child?" I asked in a low, seething voice. Geary's response was chillingly calm as he confirmed, "That's right." His tone was mocking, and for a moment, I lost control. When I came to my senses, I found Geary sprawled across the room, a toppled chair and scattered desk items around him. My clenched fist throbbed with pain, and the room was in chaos. Some were helping Geary up, while others attempted to restrain me. Geary, despite being on the receiving end of my anger, was laughing. He had baited me into this confrontation. What I had just done would invite a world of trouble, and Geary reveled in the chaos. To make matters worse, I remembered that Geary was the grandson of our company's founder, adding another layer of complexity to the situation. Punching a future company executive had severe consequences. I was suspended from my job and ultimately faced the dreaded termination. My life descended into chaos. I found myself an unemployed man, abandoned by my wife. The days that followed were marked by a tumultuous inner struggle. I knew I needed to secure employment to survive, but my actions couldn't keep pace with my thoughts. Daylight hours became an excuse to indulge in alcohol, and the nights only saw me descending further into the abyss. It was a self-destructive spiral, and I lost all motivation to do anything. The one silver lining was that I had savings, a testament to my diligence. Living through these dark days, I reached a point where I had all but given up on life. About a month into this bleak existence, an unexpected visitor knocked on my door. At first, I pretended not to be home, hoping they'd go away. But they were persistent, and the doorbell rang again after half an hour, then an hour later. Irritated, I reluctantly opened the front door to find an unfamiliar woman standing there. She had a commanding presence, her gaze piercing through me as if she were judging my very soul. I felt ashamed of the alcohol on my breath and my unkempt appearance. Gathering my composure, I finally asked, "May I ask your name?" Without mincing words, she inquired, "Are you the ex-husband of that woman?" A mention of that woman could only mean Susan, and the woman standing before me was Geary's wife. My stuttered response confirmed her suspicion, and she introduced herself as Lillian. The curious glances of neighborhood ladies passing by added to the discomfort of the situation. To avoid the inevitable gossip, I hastily invited Lillian inside. "Please come inside," I said, trying to maintain a semblance of civility. "Thank you," she replied, walking into the house without hesitation, unfazed by the chaotic state of my living room. "I can clean that up myself." I tried to insist, but Lillian was having none of it. She asserted, "We can't have a serious conversation in this mess. If you're not going to help, please sit down." Her commanding tone left me with no choice but to obey. I took a seat on the couch, watching in stunned silence as she efficiently tidied up the room. At one point, she suggested I go wash my face, and her unexpected concern prompted me to rush to the bathroom. As I looked at my disheveled reflection in the mirror, I realized how far I had let myself go. I shaved, combed my hair, and washed my face, feeling a bit more like a human being for the first time in a while. Upon my return to the living room, I found that Lillian had completed the cleaning. She had bagged up the trash and set it outside in the hallway. She offered me a cup of tea, remarking, "I used your kitchen." Her reliability surprised me, considering she was Geary's wife. "Thank you. I feel like a human again," I blurted out, my gratitude flowing naturally. Lillian responded with a faint smile, but her expression soon turned serious. She cut to the chase, revealing that her husband, Geary, had asked her for a divorce because he claimed to have a child. Now, it seemed she preferred directness over beating around the bush. I confessed that my own marriage had ended in divorce too. When I told her it's none of my business anymore, she let out a deep sigh. I added that it was evident that Geary's infidelity wasn't a one-time incident. He had a history of such affairs, and Susan had been involved with him before. Lillian's words painted a picture of a complex and troubled relationship. Despite everything, it was clear that she still harbored feelings for Geary. Lillian's motives became clear during our conversation. She wanted to find a way to remove Susan from Geary's life. It was apparent that she was more interested in reconciling with her husband than seeking a divorce. Despite the fact that Geary had betrayed her not once but twice with the same woman, even fathering a child with her, it puzzled me. Could she still harbor feelings for a man who had hurt her so deeply? When I asked Lillian if she had considered divorce, she seemed taken aback, as if the idea hadn't crossed her mind. Her expression betrayed no inclination toward separation. I couldn't help but wonder what was driving her to hold on to this troubled relationship. With a small smile, she replied, "We're married, after all." Her response left me somewhat defeated, and I agreed to discuss it further at another time. The day after Lillian's visit, Geary showed up at my doorstep. He had learned about Lillian's meeting with me and came seeking a conversation. As he was my former boss, I invited him into the living room. Geary took in the tidied-up living room and chuckled, commenting on how Lillian had cleaned up. It was evident that she had left her mark on the room, and their shared understanding of each other's ways irritated me. When I asked Geary about the reason for his visit, he dropped a bombshell. He wanted me to convince Lillian to divorce him. I was taken aback by this unexpected request. Geary explained that Lillian couldn't have children, which he desired. Susan's pregnancy presented an opportunity for him to have an heir. He offered me a substantial reward for persuading Lillian to agree to a divorce and placed a thick envelope on the table. Geary's willingness to resolve everything with money sickened me. My patience wore thin, and I grabbed him by the collar. However, Geary didn't seem too concerned. He thought he wouldn't be punched a second time. Just as I was about to strike, a soft hand intervened, gently grasping my raised fist. It was Lillian who had followed Geary into the house. She scolded me for carelessly leaving the front door wide open. As Lillian reprimanded me, I reluctantly lowered my fist and muttered my agreement. My grip on Geary's collar loosened, and the momentum of the confrontation dissipated. Lillian questioned Geary about his desire for children, and as he nodded in response, she produced divorce papers from her bag. She offered them to Geary with a stunningly beautiful yet enigmatic smile, one that seemed capable of both forgiveness and condemnation. As Geary accepted the divorce papers, his fingers lightly traced the back of Lillian's hand. It was an intimate moment that made me feel like an intruder, prompting me to avert my eyes. Geary thanked Lillian and swiftly left the house, waving without turning back. It was clear that he had accepted her declaration of war. Once Geary was out of sight, Lillian turned back to me. She suggested that we lick our wounds together, but not before seeking revenge. We both demanded compensation from Geary and Susan, who were well off financially. Despite the likelihood that they could afford to pay, we were determined to make them suffer, if only a little. I instructed my lawyer to pursue all legal matters concurrently, driven by the desire for them to experience a taste of retribution, even if it was just a small measure of payback. Soon enough, Susan came forward, tears streaming down her face. It appeared that Geary was willing to pay his share of the compensation, but he refused to cover Susan's portion. While this was understandable, given their unmarried status, there seemed to be more to the story. During a meeting involving the four of us, Geary began placing some of the blame for the affair on me. The tangled web of emotions and alliances only grew more complex. Geary tried to shift blame, claiming that his affair with Susan was a result of her feeling lonely due to my constant work. Lillian, however, saw through his excuses, accusing him of being skilled at manipulating the truth. In response, Lillian presented a comprehensive report from a private investigator. It had been initiated by Geary's parents and revealed the ongoing relationship between Susan and Geary, even after Susan had accepted a settlement to sever ties. Shockingly, my marriage to Susan had been suggested by Geary as a mere cover-up. My work-centric nature and insensitivity had made it convenient for Susan to maintain a secret relationship with Geary. Moreover, since I worked closely with Geary, it allowed them to keep a watchful eye on me. The report, compiled at considerable expense by Geary's parents, contained detailed information that left both Geary and Susan visibly shaken. Susan was the first to break, her face contorting with guilt and fear. She began to scream, but Lillian's icy gaze silenced her, causing Susan to faint. Geary, panicking, cradled her in his arms, to which Lillian only smiled, suggesting that Susan had already surrendered. It was apparent that Lillian's emotions toward Geary were complex, a mix of love and hate. Love and hate, Lillian knew, often coexisted. The depth of love often mirrored the intensity of hatred. As the conversation progressed, I played a minor role, with Lillian dominating the discussion. Eventually, the meeting concluded, and Lillian laughed, seemingly satisfied with the outcome. Following this, the reason for my divorce became public knowledge at my workplace, as I was the one who had disclosed it. Despite the company's initial attempts to cover it up, it was too late. Geary found himself sidelined at work and estranged from his family. Susan, after remarrying him, struggled with in-law problems, as Lillian's parents-in-law, who favored Lillian, treated Susan harshly for taking Lillian's place. In the end, I felt that Susan was receiving her just desserts. Once all matters related to alimony and other issues were resolved, I invited Lillian for coffee. She shared her current situation with me, explaining that she worked at a friend's company while living independently. Lillian, who couldn't have children, expressed her need to be self-sufficient. However, I disagreed with her reason for seeking independence. This took her by surprise, as it was the first time I had firmly asserted my opinion. She still wore her wedding ring, a clear sign that she hadn't forgotten Geary. Summoning my courage, I confessed my feelings, telling her that I didn't mind her situation and wanted to apply to be her boyfriend once I found a job. Lillian seemed puzzled at first, but my sincerity became apparent. I reassured her that I would never hurt her and that we understood each other's pain. She chuckled and acknowledged that she could be quite a handful. "I am well aware of that," I replied. Gently, I traced the back of her hand with my finger, and it seemed like she was recalling something as she squinted. With a delicate touch, Lillian brushed off my finger and removed her wedding ring, symbolically breaking away from her past. She lightly touched my hand, and her fingers traced the back of mine as if transferring her love into me. Lillian laughed, joyfully, promising to make me happy, and I vowed in my heart to always protect that smile. Thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel.